let's just take a second to think about what where we've been today. I mean, we've covered a lot of years and a lot of history. So think about the Christ Church. That was an impressive place.
Yes.
And Cardinal Wolsey, we kept hearing his name as we went through. He was a Catholic, the cardinal here in England, and he was the right-hand man of King Henry VIII. They called him the other king, and you can see the power he had to build something like he did. So when Henry VIII wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon, he used Leviticus 20, verse 21 for this biblical reasons. It wasn't biblical reasons, he just wanted a male heir. But Leviticus 20:21 says you should not marry your brother's wife for his impurity. And Catherine had been Henry VIII's brother's wife. Now that verse is saying if the brother and the wife is living, you shouldn't. The brother had died, but he wanted to use it to get out of the marriage. And so he had Wolsey go back to talk to the Pope and try to get an annulment, which he never would. So there's a great little rhyme you can remember about Henry VIII. Henry, 6 wives wedded, 1 died, 1 survived, 2 divorced, 2 beheaded. That's what happened to his wife. 6 wives, and he was a bit of a scoundrel. Like I say, he died 400 pounds, didn't take care of himself at the end. But you see his pictures in the Great Hall of the Christ Church. His picture is still front and center there. So because Wolsey couldn't get the divorce settled, he dispatched him. He put him in exile, and Wolsey died in exile. Wolsey's right-hand man was a guy named Thomas Cromwell. And Cromwell kind of ditched Wolsey, which he regretted to the end of his life, and he became basically the prime minister, basically the king's right-hand man, the other king. And he went around and destroyed. So when they broke off then, because the Catholic Church would not allow the annulment, they break off and become the Church of England. So we talked about yesterday, the king's hand is in the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and he moves it whichever way he wants. So we now have the Protestant Reformation starting here, which is going back to Luther and then Calvin, and then moving this way. So amazing things are happening there. Cromwell eventually falls out of favor with the king as well because of some life situations, and he's beheaded, he's killed. And then Thomas Cranmer becomes the archbishop of the first archbishop of the Church of England. And we saw his name on the church the other day. So Cranmer is one of the guys then who came to Oxford. And if you have your book, if you don't, that's fine. On page 18, I just got some names of some people there, and we'll go through that real quick. Some prominent people in history that went to Christ Church that we were at. So John Wycliffe. Remember John Wycliffe? He's the one who wrote the Latin, no, that was Jerome. So in 300, Jerome translates the Bible from Greek and Hebrew. If we go to Israel next year, we'll go to Bethlehem, and we'll walk across to a church and go down in a place where Jerome actually wrote the Latin Vulgate and died in that room as well. So he does that in 1300s, the 300s. In the 1300s, then John Wycliffe, he translates the Latin Vulgate to English. So he doesn't go back to the original language of Greek and Hebrew, but he goes from Latin, and the Vulgate is just the Bible in common language. He goes back to the Latin, and then he interprets the scripture, and he writes against the king as well. He is not for what's going on in the Catholic Church. And again, we said yesterday they dug up his bones later on. And the next guy is Thomas Cranmer. And Thomas Cranmer, 1489 to 1556, he was the first Protestant archbishop. At the end of Henry VIII, he didn't care about the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church. It was all about power. And he actually believed in Catholic doctrine. So at the end of his life, he wrote these things called the 6 Articles. And the 6 Articles said, we believe in transubstantiation, we believe in celibacy of priests. Basically, we believe in Catholicism. Thomas Cranmer, by this time, said, I don't believe that. And he spoke out against Henry VIII. But because of Henry VIII's love for him, he did not behead him, which he normally did with people even like Cromwell. So he's one of the ones. Then we'll talk about in a little bit. So Mary, Bloody Mary, is the next queen. She brings Catholicism back.
Edward VI was in there.
Yeah.
No, Edward VI was between Henry VIII.
Edward VI. Okay,
yeah,
his
so
son.
there was that brief Protestant flourishing, and then Bloody
That's
Mary.
right. You're right. And then Mary comes. Cranmer's still there, and she convinces Cranmer to recant Protestantism and embrace Catholicism. And he does, but he regrets that. And then he goes back on that, and he's burned at the stake. And they say that because he signed with his right hand that recanting, when he went in the stake, he put his hand in the fire first before his whole body was burned up. So that was Cranmer, one of the guys that you saw on that statue. Hugh Latimer was another bishop. He ruled. 1555. He was burned at the stake under Queen Mary, and he was put to death with. In your book, it's Radley. It should be Ridley, not Radley, but Ridley. Both of them were Oxford men, and here's what he said before they were burned. He said, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out again." Play the man, Ridley. So again, both of those guys were put to death. And William Tyndale, he is around that time. So when you think of the Bible, think of 4 people. Think of Jerome, Latin Vulgate. Think of Wycliffe. Then think of Tyndale. So Tyndale goes back to the original Greek and Hebrew, and he translates the Bible, and the printing press is around by this time. So now you got the Bible in people's hands. People can actually, to this point, no one's reading the Bible except the priests. We'll end here real quick. He opposed Henry VIII's plan for annulment. So he spoke out. He went into exile, but he was arrested in Brussels, and he was burned at the stake as well. So when you think of the Bible translations, Jerome, Wycliffe, Tyndale, and then who would the last one be? 1611?
King James.
King James, right? King James authorized the Bible. So if you want to know what they spoke like in that day, read the King James Bible. So it's just amazing that those guys. I want to mention one more guy here, George Whitefield. He was at Oxford as well. He was involved in a revival here in England. We said the other day he was a Calvinist. He brought on John Wesley. They worked together for a while, but because of Whitefield's Calvinism and Wesley's Arminianism, they split. Whitefield went to the United States, and Benjamin Franklin did a lot of work. Benjamin Franklin was not a Christian. He was a deist. But he did a lot of work with Whitefield. And Benjamin Franklin said, finally, there's a Christian who actually does something, because Whitefield was starting orphanages in the United States, in Savannah, Georgia. And they say that Benjamin Franklin gave to that, would go listen to him preach. Franklin did some measurements one time. He spoke out in the open. Remember, Wesley didn't like him speaking out in the open at first. But he would go speak out in the open, and they say he could speak to 30,000 people without a microphone. Amazing. Wow. I've read stories where he would, about every night, he'd be spitting up blood, because he would just chair up his throat as he's projecting to people, but it never stopped him. And another story, I've read this and I cannot find it again, but they say that Benjamin Franklin, every time he would go hear Whitefield, it wasn't a believer, but every time he would go hear Whitefield, he would put money in the pot when it was passed around. Whitefield spent most of his life raising money. He was in debt most of his life, and for these orphanages. And one day, Franklin said, I'm not taking any money today because I'll put it in if I do. And he didn't take any money. He goes and listens to Whitefield, and they found in the pot an IOU from Benjamin Franklin, a little piece of paper. So I got to confirm that. Maybe that's legend, but I think that's an interesting story. But again, he said, finally a Christian who's doing something. He's actually doing something for these kids. So